What I want to draw attention to, as many of you have seen on stage, we have red dresses, and I myself am wearing a red dress, and Stephen had on his lapel, or still has, a square of moose hide. And so we are wearing this tonight to recognize missing and murdered women and girls, and so the Red Dress campaign has been doing that for several years now across the country to get momentum on this. And there are a number of people across the country who are wearing red and who have been tweeting in pictures to show their solidarity, and we deeply, deeply appreciate that. The Moose Hide campaign that Stephen is supporting is for men to show their support to against Indigenous women and girls. And so this is an incredibly powerful and important night for us. I really, again, can't thank you enough for being here, and I can't thank you enough for being willing to share this story, not only with people in this room, but with thousands of people across the live stream. So I'm going to invite Elder Agnes Gould up, or commonly known as Aggie Baby. And while you make your way up to the stage with your microphone, I'm going to read your bio. This woman has done a tremendous amount of things. If anyone knows her, she is a fabulous radio personality in this region. So since 1994, Agnes Gould has been on 8 radio stations in Canada and 1 station in the United States. Currently on C99 FM member 2 radio station as Aggie Baby, promoting native music from genres of rock, blues, country, folk, dance, and East Coast. Her daily 3-hour show includes a day in Mi'kmaq history, events, culture, language, legends, trivia, and hourly updates on the weather. She is the daughter, am I saying this right, of Susan Isaac and Charlie Tony Gould in member 2 Nova Scotia, and the oldest of 7 children. She is the mother of 2 children and now a grandmother, which is wonderful. Her first job in member 2 was collecting milk bottles at the young age of 2, and she started to rake blueberries, picking potatoes by the age of 5, and started beadwork at age 6, and then started to help instruct beadwork by the age of 12. She does tremendous beadwork for those of you who have not had the pleasure of meeting her. She has since held, check out those earrings, 10% off at the member. Oh, it's great. The member Heritage Park has those earrings. She has since held numerous jobs, including as a factory worker in her 20s at St. Regis Paper Mill and Blue Hill Blueberry Factory, an instructor for various crafts, including beadwork, macrame, embroidery, and jewelry design in her early 30s, a genealogy researcher, a social worker, a drug and alcohol counselor, a powwow coordinator, a crisis worker for abused and neglected children, and a foster parent, which is an amazing array of things that you do to support your community. She was the recipient of the Governor General Award in 1992 and was one of only 2 people who received this in the state of Maine, and was the first Mi'kmaq woman on the East Coast Music Awards radio and has been a judge for both the East Coast Music Awards and Juno Awards. In 2014, she was awarded the Edward Kabaddi Memorial Award for Aboriginal Language and Culture in member 2. But beyond all that, she has been one of the biggest advocates for missing and murdered Indigenous women for a national for many, many years in Canada, and is well known and widely known across this country for the work that she has done, for her unflinching courage to face her family's story and tell her family's story, and to do the work that she does so that our country can learn, and so that finally, things can come forward and truth can emerge. I want to thank a special shout out to Clifford Paul, because Clifford suggested this and Jeff Ward made the connection, and we couldn't be happier and more honored to have you on this stage. So welcome, and thank you so much for being here and sharing your story.
Oh, yes. My name is Agnes Gould. That's my given name. I'm known as Aggie Baby. Play it loud, play it proud, as we always say, right? I do a lot of music. I also have a lot of other given names by different communities. In one community, I'm known as Snapping Turtle. See the money? She's going to get it, right? In one community, we won't go into this story, but I'm known as the Bite Hard Woman, right? I'm also known as the Ancient on the Powwow Trail. She was there before Christ, you know? There's a lot of other great stories that I could share about myself. One of the best things I ever had happen is I was born to a woman named Suzanne. There was 2 children that were born before me, but they didn't live. I came into this world as a preemie. In other words, I couldn't wait to get here, right? That's pretty much it. And then my brother Carl was born, and my brother David was born. And we are the Goulds, Gould. We are the Beaver Clan, Gubbit. And then my father died, and my mother met Robert Pictou, originally from Bayfield, Buckankeg, and now lives in Woodladet. And he helped sire 4 others. My brother Robert, who's the one that did the video, by the way. My brother Glunsaway, and my sister Virginia, who is missing. And the youngest one is called Daryl, who we nicknamed Ditch, but that's another story. So the nicest thing I got to say is I appreciate you all being here to hear my story. My story is always different every time I share it, because I never know what I'm going to share. So just give me 1 minute while I get ready. I have been carrying around this flyer for almost 23 years. 23 years come April. The anniversary is coming up. Our family is what you would call frozen in time. That's the best way to describe somebody that is part of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. There's a couple of ground rules I like to establish. First, while I'm talking, nobody please come up to me, try to comfort me or give me tissues or anything. To me, that's an act of aggression, which I will share about why it is an act of aggression for me. Okay? But this poster I've been carrying around for a long time. My sister, Virginia, we know as, we call her Jen. When I was growing up, at a very young age, I knew at a young age when my mother said, I'm going to have a baby. And I was going, oh yes, a sister. I just love that idea. She had a boy. And another boy. And then another boy. I thought that's all I was going to have is brothers. And then finally she had a little girl. And I was just absolutely thrilled. Absolutely thrilled. Even though I was several years older than her, I got to raise her. I got to help raise her. I got to hold her, have her throw up all over me when I did it wrong, to change her, bathe her, feed her, hold her hands while she was learning to walk. And when she got older, she used to come into my room and crawl into bed with me. For some reason, little kids have really cold feet. Did you ever notice that? They have really cold feet. Well, she would put those cold feet on me, and I'm like, ugh. But I absolutely loved my little sister. See, I'm the oldest of these boys. She's on the other end. She's the youngest. When I came about 12 years old, I realized something. I better stop picking on these guys. They're like 6 foot now. Okay, we're going to start being friends. She's on the other end. I can still take you down. I can still take you down, right? So we grew up very different, but at the same time, we have all these brothers and we have each other. Now, there's a lot of parts of my life that I could share. My mother, I was fortunate to have taught me how to do beadwork at a young age. She taught us all how to do beadwork. And when she did that, she also shared stories and legends and talked about the old worlds. Not just the old world, but the old worlds. The worlds beneath the ground, the ones in the water. And that's some of the stuff you don't hear anymore. And she would to my brothers about the spirit world while we were learning how to do beadwork. So I was very fortunate to have a mother that was like that. She went to residential school. Unfortunately, since her size, she grew to 4'10" and a half. She always included that half, by the way. And all my brothers are 6 feet tall, so you can imagine what it was like. But she was small but mighty. But she never went beyond grade 2 because of her size. And for years they hid her from the residential schools, recruiters that went around. They would literally hide her. So I was very fortunate to have grown up with knowledge from a lot of the old worlds, as I call them. And then, even though after she became a young widow, and we ended up moving, because she didn't want us to be part of that residential. So I went to a school, and I didn't know any English. And when I speak Mi'kmaq, you'll still see me every once in a while do that, because I'm used to getting hit. So I can relate with some of the residential school survivors about the piece of wood that was shoved in their mouths for them talking. Things like that. If it was not for my students, my fellow students, they would have, they helped me through school. It was them that helped me. Teach me how to speak English, the proper pronunciations of TH. I used to be stood up in front of the school, mada, fada, brada, oh good God, whatever, right? But we did it. And my brother Carl, who was next in line, he took a lot of blunt of the abuse too. But by the time it got to Virginia, they weren't as harsh. So it was good. Unfortunately, at one point, I grew up in a great violence. A lot of violence. And my sister also grew up in a great deal of violence, to the point where we were desensitized. We thought it was normal to see blood, to see black eyes, to see bruises, broken fingers. So we were desensitized to that. I didn't learn that that was not normal until college. And that was like, oh my gosh, you mean abuse is not part of a relationship? Oh my God, that's unusual. So at one point, I left, and my siblings were all taken away, and we were all placed in foster care. And I was really happy when they came through the door, because I said, oh, there's my family. And my sister and I reached out to each other right away, as we all. Unfortunately, in the home that we were in, we were both raped by the man that was there. Me as a teenager and her as a child. And each night we would reach out for each other because there was so much pain. Nobody heard us. Nobody listened to us. It was not until my mother heard and she went after the social worker, the superintendent, everybody. She went after everybody until they finally released us from that home. So by then, it was good that each one, they separated us all. The only two that ended up being together was my brother Francis Blunsaway and my brother Robert, and the two youngest, which had suffered the most, Virginia and Daryl. To this day, my brother Daryl will not talk about any of this. My sister Virginia out to me when it was just her and I in the quietest of night when nobody else was around. Some of this stuff I very rarely share. In fact, the only time I do share is usually in a sweat lodge or in a talking circle where I know it's safe. I know there's healing. I know there's good grandmothers and good grandfathers surrounding me. That's usually when I share it. So, just to let you know, I'm very much shaken right now, as you can see, talking about some of this stuff. And then I went off to college, and in my 20s, yeah, I had a motorcycle. I had lived in a house with several people. I did a lot that I know when I face the Creator, I'm going to be saying, can I explain that, please? Can I explain that situation, please? Right? But I think one of the reasons I think is it was great because I got to, all my brothers had stayed with me at one point or another. Brother Carl, he was living on the streets in Boston, sleeping under the bridges. And he would hitchhike up to wherever I was living once a year, stay with me for a week, rob me blind. Oh, wait a minute. His inventory, that's what he called it. Anyway, he would do that, and it was great. You know, my brother Carl. And then there was my brother David. I picked him up on my motorcycle, put him on the back. Scared the living daylights out of him a couple of times, but that's beside the point. And he learned all homemade spaghetti and a keg party at the age of 15. My mother was not impressed. And then there's my brother Robert, who showed up on my doorstep with in a T-shirt, a pair of jeans, and a pair of sneakers. Up from Florida. He had gotten what they called black lung because of the amount of dust that's on the beaches and stuff, right? So my mother always used to say, if you're in trouble, go see your sister. And I would take them all in at one point or another. Blunsaway was the only one that would come to my house and leave the same day. He said, I don't know about staying here, sis. I would go, okay. My brother Daryl, he lived with me for a whole year after my mother died. Any worse to go. My sister Virginia, there was many a times I went and picked her up, except for one night. When she was young, when we were younger, I should say that, we were expecting babies at the same time. Our firstborns are 28 days apart, That's right, 28 days apart. And in our culture, of course, you always put the cousins together, right? Oh, look, there's baby girl and baby boy. Oh, cool. And, and they treat each other like brother and sister. Dunk. I'm going to kick you upside the head. You do that again, right? Or I'm going to tell on you, right? And those were all the things that were wonderful as far as I was concerned. She gave birth to 7 children. 7 children. And at one point, she came to me with this beautiful little girl. And she said, I can't take care of her. Would you take care of her? And I said, yeah, okay, whatever, right. And I took care of her. She became a sister to my 2 children. And I absolutely loved that little girl. She was in a very abusive relationship. And he came down without my sister. And he stood at my gate, and I stood at the door. And he says, I'm coming for the little girl. And I said, no, you're not. You're not having her. Yes, I am. I said, no, you're not. And I don't care how big you are or whatever, you're not having her. So he left, tore off, went and got my sister. Jen came over and says, I got to ask for her back. And I said, okay, not a problem. Packed up her things, and she waved and said, and I said, see you later, sweetie. 2 weeks later, we lost her in a fire. My sister and I reached out for each other. For we lost the one thing that was really bonded us so close together, more than the pregnancy, more than growing up, was the lost little girl. She was so brave. Oh my God, she was so brave. Fire broke out. And the little one went to go get her brother. My sister busted open the window, cut her hand, and she threw my nephew, the firstborn, out the window. And she threw the second one. And then she threw the baby, who was 3 months old, to my nephew. And he caught her. And this is in October. Another date that you don't forget. I know it's an anniversary that she would never be able to forget, because I couldn't forget it. I have pictures of her that I don't even take out to this day. To this day, I still keep those pictures safely hidden away. Every once in a while, I'll come across them. And every once in a while, I'll start crying. She was a beautiful little girl. And then my sister would call me. I need you to come pick me up. Okay. Jump in my car. Go pick her up, pick up all the kids, bring her to my place. Let her stay there a week or two. Noticed there was a lot of bruises on her. Later on, when I became a social worker and a crisis worker, I did a whole study on bruises. You can tell the difference of bruises. If they're with an object, if they're with your boot, if they're with your hand, You can even tell a bruise if you're lugging boxes to move, right? Learned a lot when I was a crisis worker. And then he would come down. I love you, babe. I won't do that again, babe. I'm a better man, babe. And she would look at me and I would go, Asagio, it's your choice. It's what you're going to do. I always feel bad for doing that. I still feel bad about doing that. And then she would go back. She would call me. She'd go back, call me. And when I became a social worker, I started doing home visits, trying to catch him hitting on the kids. And I never caught him. Although, where'd you get the black eye? Oh, I walked into a door. How'd you get those bruises on the back of your neck? Oh, I fell down in the bathtub. They look like fingerprints, you know. But like I said, we were desensitized. We were used to violence. Anyway, she started doing better. She went back to school. And she started doing better. Still the bruising, but at least she was doing something for herself. And I ended up going to Unama'ki. I was asked to conduct a sweat. And I said, yeah. So I went up to Shubi. And I was right in the middle of the sweat. In the third round, in fact, which is the round for the body. And while I was putting water on the grandmothers and the grandfathers, I started to get blows to my head, blows to my body, in the sweat at that. Whoa, what's this? And then I couldn't do the fifth round, which is the bear round, right? So I asked another sweat keeper, would you do the fifth round for me? I don't feel right. She goes, okay. So I went back in the house. Now, I'll meet you in for the feast, I said. Went and had the feast, and I said, I'm really tired. I'm going to go lay down, go to bed. And at that point, I had a dream of two men dragging a young woman across a small stream and burying her. And there was a third person watching. And I woke up in panic. Whoa, what's this? What's this? So the next day, I called where she was. And they said, your sister's missing. I said, what? And I jumped in my car and tried to get there. I couldn't make it there. But I did eventually make it there. And you know what? My brother, David, who was in New Hampshire at that time, had the exact same dream. So I think my sister reached out to me and my brother at the same time of being buried, right? But you can't prove anything. So one of the first things that I did, being a social worker, being a crisis worker, I ended up starting to make flyers, which is the flyer you see there. I started to call all the crisis centers there was, all the shelters there was. I sent that flyer out to every reserve there was. If you were going to a powwow out in Sioux country, here, take a flyer. Hey, you're going to a powwow down Massachusetts, here, take a flyer. That flyer went everywhere. It was posted everywhere. And ended up being shared with everybody. People still have that original flyer, but it doesn't look as yellow as yours, Aggie. And I'm going, yeah, I know. I've been carrying that around for a long time. There's times when it's hard, but coming around April 24th is very hard. My brother Carl, 3 years we laid him to rest because he died in a fire to be with my sister. I'm going to help her on the other side. We've gone to every ceremony there is. We've gone to sweats, talking circles, shaking tent. We've gone on 4-day fasts. We've gone on vision quest, or whatever you want to call it. But to us, it's 4-day fast. Commitments is what you're doing. And, the other thing that you'll find if you are part of this is there's lots of psychics out there. And for a small fee, we can help you find your loved one. You'll find a lot of those come out of the woodwork, by the way. But anyway, my brother, we buried 3 years after, 1996. My brother David is in southern Maine. That's right, in Kennebunk. Because the possibility of her being there. So it says, so he stays in that area. My brother Robert, well, she might be out west. My brother Robert lives in British Columbia. My brother Francis Blunsaway, he lives in the Boston area. She might be in the Boston area. My brother Daryl Ditch, he stays in northern Maine. He shows up there. At one point, there was many times I kept my ears to the missing bodies that were found. I couldn't sleep for several days. One of the things that I've discovered was people pray other people a lot, right? At one point, they heard that there was a girl by the name of Virginia Sue Pictou living in Halifax. And she fit the perfect description of my sister. So I called a friend, and I told him, go down and see if it's her. And he said, yep, I'm going down, right? I'm going down, cuz. So he went down, and he's a photographer, so he can blend in with anybody. Don't have to ever worry about. And he says, I guess for you. And I said, what's that? A woman had stolen my sister's identity from the flyer. Said she was Virginia Sue Pictou. She had the same birthday, the same nationality. Everything was the same. Somehow or another, she got a hold of my sister's social insurance number. So, identity theft, we had to charge this young woman. But, you know, this is my sister's we're talking about. We still believe that possibility that she may be alive, But the reality is, we don't think it's really true. We have posters. We have a Facebook page to search for her. We have several films done out. Crime Stopper film we've done. In fact, the first time I heard about Gladys is when a story we did together with Gladys. And Abraham Simon used to stay at our house. That's why I kind of chuckled when you said that, right? And recently, we go every year to northern Maine, and we do a physical search. There's a group of us. During this third week in August, we search riverbank, wells, old abandoned houses, mounds, wherever. We have that special dog. Costs $200, by the way, US, just for an hour for that dog. But we do it. We take that dog with us. That dog has brought closure to other families, by the way, but not to ours yet. But thank God for that dog. And we get together after that. Have what we call a healing circle, a talking circle, because this affects the children as well as our family that is frozen in time. See, the children were all taken away. Not allowed any connection at all with them. They were totally adopted out of the tribe. No connection at all with us. Not allowed to find out where they were or anything like that. But of course, that firstborn, I know Auntie Ag. I know where she is. I'll find her. So through the use of Facebook, I've come reconnected with all my nephews and my nieces. It's the most wonderful thing. And each year when I see them, they have stories of Virginia. And each year we have a healing circle for them. And they're learning their traditional ways. They're learning about dance, singing, a little bit of language, hugs, a lot of things, right? They're learning a lot about smudging. And then we do an honor dance at the powwow that's there. And every year for many, many years, my good friend Diamond used to lead that dance. And I miss Diamond Nicholas. He's from Tobic. And he used to say, this is for Virginia and for all missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So we would all dance. At first, it was very hard to dance because we were full of just weighed down. But as it got easier, as the people we saw coming into the circle and helping that load, it really does help quite a bit. The flyers, they still go out. People still join the Facebook page. Last year, my brother and I, Robert, went to Winnipeg. He flew in from BC, and I flew in from Unama'ki. And we did what was called wiping away the tears. And one of the things that was going on is we talked about the so-called border, because our culture, we moved a lot. We would go to Maine to rake blueberries in the back of Eddie Kabaddy's truck, by the way. I was one of those. Would go pick potatoes, right? And then come back home. I would have nice new clothes. But anyway, we did a lot. One of the things that in the wiping away the tears for the national wiping away the tears there was a quilt. And in the video, you'll see the 3 RCMP officers pulling down black blankets. Her picture, this picture right here that we put beadwork on and everything else, is right below the hair and the breast, right over the heart of that quilt. And we are so honored that it would be recognized. And then we met with Halifax, Dr. Carol Bennett. My hat goes off to her because she has to hear a lot of stories. In my family alone, I speak about it. As easier as I go along, this is difficult as it was originally. My stepfather, her father, speaks about it, and he has a hard time. My brother, David, won't speak about it. Robert speaks about it out on the West Coast. And he always says, end the violence, especially towards women. My brother Francis won't speak about it. My brother Darrell won't speak about it. But there's at least 3 of us that speak about it. Then recently, we had another, when I met with the minister, I said, not only do you need to bring up the issues about missing and murdered, right? By the way, I sat with the families of the Picton families that their family went through the court of the Picton family. Their daughter was one of the ones that were murdered. Hearing their story was tremendous. I heard so many stories, it's incredible. I have not got to the point of being the family of Gladys, of being found. I haven't got to that point yet. But every time I see that video, I cry. And I think about so many different names. When I was younger, one of the first cases I heard about was the 2 sets of couples that went across on the Bedore Lakes. One of the women was pregnant, and that case is still unsolved. And they were from Eskasoni. How do I know about this case? It was my great-grandmother that took care of those kids. And then, when I was growing up as a teenager, my aunt was beaten to death by 2 men. No record at all. And then, in 1976, on my birthday, while I was in college, I heard about Annie Mae Pictou. And I was furious when they said she was a militant. She was a militant. She was a caring woman that loved elders, loved children, loved helping women. I didn't think she was a militant. When I hear people say, oh, she's a senator. No. That woman is a cared and loved individual. Stop the classification. I hate that. I'm sorry. But that's one of the things that Dr. Carol Bennett probably has to hear, is the classification of women and where they work. I said we need to approach not only the missing and murdered Indigenous women and children, girls, we need to start talking about the missing men. I think about Chris Metallic every day. And we need to start talking about those that are transgender. So, I have all sorts of wonderful memories of my sister. You know what my nephews and nieces have every year in April? the detective comes, says, "Have you heard from your mother?"